Hi everybody, welcome back to A+ Maths. This is Heidi Postle. Today we're going to continue on with quadratic equations, but this time we're going to learn how to solve a quadratic equation by completing the square. Now, completing the square is very different to anything else that we've ever done before, and a lot of people find it really hard, really challenging, and really get very lost, and then they think this is too difficult. We're not going to do that. There is a process that we're going to follow. There's a way that you need to do these. And even if you're not quite sure of exactly why we're doing it, that shouldn't stop you from being able to do them and give them a really good go. I'm going to start by showing you an example of one quadratic equation by completing the square. And of course, the first time you see it, you're going to be thinking, oh my gosh, what is going on? Then I'm going to go through the process and all the 5 steps that you need to follow, and then I'll go through more examples, and hopefully by the end of the video, you'll actually be able to do them on your own. Let's have a look and let's get started on the first question. So let's have a look at some examples of completing the square questions. Remember, the first example is going to be really tricky. I just want you to have a look, just watch. What happens when we can't factorize an equation? For example, x squared plus 12x plus 4 equals 0. What do? We can't find any factors of 4 and 1, 2 times 2, that will add to give 12 as well. None of those are going to add to give 12 and multiply to give 4. So we're going to set it up to get ready to complete the square. We're going to keep the x's on the left, x squared plus 12x equals, and we're going to move the 4 to the other side. So we're going to have minus 4. We're going to make it into a perfect square. That's the whole point of doing this, is making it into a perfect square. A perfect square is x plus something all squared, equals of course our minus 4. So we need to now think of what's going to go in our space to make a perfect square. And to do that, we're going to add half of the middle number, half the number in front of the x squared to both sides, and that's going to make our perfect square. So what's half of 12? Well, sometimes we can't do the halving in our head. Of course, half of 12 is 6, but we're not going to do it in our head. We're going to write it down as 12 divided by 2. 12 over 2, 12 over 2, add it into all the spaces. Remember that half of 12 is the same as 12 divided by 2 is 6. But we're not going to write down 6 straight away. Then we can write down our next line, x plus 6 all squared equals 32. And of course, we write the 32 down. We can just work out negative 4 plus bracket 12 over 2 all squared on our calculator. We're left with x plus 6 equals root 32 and x plus 6 equals minus root 32 if we square root both sides. And then we solve. X equals minus 6 plus root 32 and x equals minus 6 minus root 32. So the process, step number 1, was check to see if it factorizes first. Because of course, if it factorizes first, that's the easiest way to solve any quadratic equation. Step number 2, put it in the correct order. X squared first, then x, and then you put your constant or your number, move it to the other side of the equation, the right-hand side. This is the tricky bit. Make sure that you've left spaces for the bits that you want to add. Step number 3, write the perfect square and prepare for actually completing the square. And make sure that your sign inside the bracket is the same as the one that's in front of the x. Step number 4, add the square of half the coefficient, half the number in front of the x, to all your brackets that you've prepared in step number 3. And then step number 5 is just solve it. Square root both sides and take any numbers to the other side. Let's see if we can follow the process. X squared plus x minus 1 equals 0. It doesn't factorize. That's the first thing we notice. So step number 2 says, put everything in the right order. X squared plus x, we want the x's to stay on the left, equals, we take the constant to the other side, 1. So we have x squared plus x equals 1. And don't forget to leave spaces. Write down the next line as well. Get ready for the perfect square. X plus something all squared equals 1. Now we know that we're set up so that we can actually complete the square. And what do we do when we complete the square? We add half of whatever number's in front of the x, which in this case is 1. Make sure that the pluses are the same so that your perfect square is actually correct. So we need to add half of 1 in all of these brackets. Of course, a half of 1 is the same as 1 over 2. So I write 1 over 2, 1 over 2, 1 over 2, 1 over 2 in all the brackets that I've already set up. Now I can complete the square. Write down what's left. X plus a half equals 5 over 4. How did I get the 5 over 4? I did it on my calculator. And then I square root both sides. And what am I left with? X plus a half equals the square root of 5 over 4. Or x plus a half equals minus the square root of 5 over 4. Now I want to be able to simplify this right-hand side. So what we have to remember is a little bit about our square roots. So if we have a look, we need to remember that the square root of 5 over 4 is the same as the square root of 5 over the square root of 4, which equals the square root of 5 over 2, because the square root of 4 is 2. So then we can come back and add it in over here. So we have x plus a half equals the square root of 5 over 2. Don't forget the 2 comes from our working up there. And on the other side I have the same thing. X plus a half equals minus the square root of 5 over 2. And then I take the minus a half to the other side. And I'm left with x equals minus a half minus root 5 over 2. Are you starting to see what's going on? Let's have a look again. Stay with it. You'll get this. X squared minus 5x minus 2 equals 0. Step 1, doesn't factorize. Nothing multiplies to give 2 and adds to give 5. Step number 2, put it in the right order. X squared minus 5x, leave a space, equals, put the constant to the other side, 2. And then we want to write down on the next line the perfect square that we are about to create. X minus something all squared equals 2. Now we need to remember that we need to add to both sides, and then we're making our perfect square. Be careful because the one here inside the brackets doesn't have a squared sign. That squared is outside. Make sure that your minuses are the same. Always matches the one in front of x. Now we need to find half of the coefficient of x, half the number in front of the x. In this case, the number in front of the x is 5. So half of 5 is 5 over 2. We don't need to halve it. Just write 5 over 2 in all the brackets that we've already prepared. And then we write down what's left. X minus 5 on 2 all squared equals, do this bit on the calculator, 33 over 4. Now we need to square root both sides, just like we've done in the last videos. And we're left with x minus 5 over 2 equals the square root of 33 over 4, or x minus 5 over 2 equals minus the square root of root 33 over 4. And then I'm going to have x minus 5 over 2 equals the square root of 33 over 2. Remember where the 2 comes from? Because root 33 over 4 is the same as root 33 over root 4, which equals root 33 over 2, because the square root of 4 equals 2. Don't forget how to work that out. So we come back over here, and then I take the minus 5 over 2 to the other side, so I'm left with x equals 5 over 2 plus the square root of 33 over 2. And if I go to the other one, I do the same thing. X minus 5 over 2 equals minus the square root of 33 on 2, because we've square rooted the top and we square rooted the bottom. And then I take the minus 5 over 2 to the other side, and I'm left with x equals 5 over 2 minus the square root of 33 over 2. Let's do it once more. Hopefully you're starting to get the hang of it. 2x squared plus 12x minus 13 equals 0. This one is slightly different. Why? Because I have a 2 in front of my x squared, and that's a problem. We cannot complete the square ever with a number in front of the x squared. We're going to divide everything by 2. So I get x squared plus half of 12 is 6, and then half of 13, I'm just going to write minus 13 over 2 equals 0. I'm going to put the letters on the left and I'm going to move the number to the right. X squared plus 6x equals 13 over 2. And I'm going to prepare it for completing the square. Put the brackets, x plus something, brackets squared. Don't forget to leave your spaces so that we prepare for adding in all the bits that we need. I like to put in the plus brackets so that I'm all ready to add everything in. Now be careful. Make sure that the signs are correct in your bracket. If there's a plus in front of that 6, in front of the x, you need a plus to be inside your brackets. Now we need to add half of the number in front of the x, 6 over 2. So we're going to add 6 over 2 into all the brackets that we've already prepared. And now we write down what's left. X plus 3 all squared equals, and we do this bit on the calculator, 31 on 2. You don't have to do it in your head, just use your calculator. And then we write down the square root of both sides, which is x plus 3 equals the square root of 31 over 2, or x plus 3 equals minus the square root of 31 on 2. Now, we can't simplify that because the square root of 31 can't simplify and the square root of 2 can't simplify. So now we just have to take the numbers to the other side and solve it. X equals minus 3 plus root 31 on 2 and x equals minus 3 minus root 31 on 2. And that's how you do it with a number in front of the x squared. Let's try another one. 8x squared minus 3x minus 2 equals 0. Remember, our problem is this 8. So we divide everything by 8. So we're going to have x squared minus 3 over 8x minus 2 over 8 equals 0. I'm not going to simplify anything. Now I'm going to prepare it for completing the square. Put the x squared, then the x, move the constant to the other side, equals 2 over 8. And make sure you leave spaces for the bits that I need to add in later. And of course I prepare the next line with the brackets for the actual completing of the square. So I'm going to have brackets, x minus space, close bracket squared, equals 2 over 8. Now I'm going to prepare for completing the square. I'm going to make sure that I add the brackets where I need them. Squared, 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 and over here inside the brackets there's no squared because it's on the outside. I need to make sure that the signs are correct. Remember that the sign has to be the same as the one in front of the x. And now what do I need to do? I need to put the number inside the brackets that I'm adding in to complete the square, half of what's in front of the x, half the coefficient of x. So what's half of 3/8? You could use your calculator, or you could work it out and go half of 3/8, 3 over 8 divided by 2 over 1, which is the same as 3 over 8 times by a half. Remember, when you have a fraction, when you want to divide, you change it to a times and you flip the fraction upside down. And then you times the top times the bottom. So we have 3 times 1 is 3 and 8 times 2 is 16. That's where your 3 over 16 comes from. Then we write it down what's left. X minus 3 over 16 all squared equals 73 over 256. Again, use your calculator to work that bit out. You don't need to do anything in your head and then get it wrong. We want to get it right. It's difficult enough as it is. We square root both sides. We're left with x minus 3 over 16 equals the square root of 73 over 256, or x minus 3 over 16 equals minus the square root of 73 over 256. Now remember, if you can simplify the top or the bottom, you need to do that. So I look at this and I know that the square root of 256 is actually 16. So I can write this down as x equals 3 over 16 plus root 73 over 16. And on the other side, I have x equals 3 over 16 minus root 73 over 16. Let's try one more. How about you pause the video and you have a go at this one on your own? And then you can see my answer at the end. First thing, divide everything by 3. X squared plus 5 over 3x minus a third equals 0. Put it in the right order. X squared's on the left, x on the left, and the number on the right. So we should have x squared plus 5 on 3x with a space equals a third. Our next line, we prepare for the brackets. Put your brackets, x plus something all squared, leave a space, and our 1/3 stays on the right-hand side. I like to add brackets where I'm going to be adding them. We check the sign. Make sure that they're correct. The pluses have to be the same as what's in front of the coefficient of x. And then we need to add in all my brackets half of the number in front of the x. So we need to do half of 5 on 3. You could do it on your calculator. The way we work it out is by doing 5 over 3 divided by 2, which is 5 over 3 divided by 2 over 1. And then we change it to a times and flip the fraction upside down. So we have 5 over 3 times by a half, which is 5 times 1 is 5, and 3 times 2 is 6. 5, 6. That's where it comes from. It's not magic. We're just halving 5 over 3. The next line, we write down what we've actually done. So what have we actually got? X plus 5 over 6 all squared equals, and then work it out on your calculator. 37 out of 36. You don't want to get it wrong. Don't make the question more complicated than what it has to be. Use your calculator and get 37 over 36. Now we need to square root both sides. Hopefully you did that. Did you do that? If so, I'm really proud of you. Good on you. And we have x plus 5 over 6 equals the square root of 37 over 36. And x plus 5 over 6 equals minus the square root of 37 over 36. Most people would know that the square root of 36 is 6. So we should be able to write our next line of working as being x equals minus 5 over 6 plus root 37 over 6, or x equals minus 5 over 6 minus root 37 over 6. So I hope that you're slowly starting to understand how to do completing the square, and it's not as daunting as it was originally. Just remember that it's really a process. You need to remember your 5 steps, and then you need to do them and follow them every single time. And as you start to get better, you might be able to cut a little bit of the working or make it a little bit quicker for yourself. But if you find them different, or if the teacher's trying to trick you or the question's trying to trick you and it makes it slightly unusual, always go back to your original process and do everything step by step. So let's go through the process one more time. So the process, step number 1, was check to see if it factorizes first. Because of course, if it factorizes first, that's the easiest way to solve any quadratic equation. Step number 2, put it in the correct order. X squared first, then x, and then you put your constant or your number, move it to the other side of the equation, the right-hand side. This is the tricky bit. Make sure that you've left spaces for the bits that you want to add. Step number 3, write the perfect square and prepare for actually completing the square. And make sure that your sign inside the bracket is the same as the one that's in front of the x. Step number 4, add the square of half the coefficient, half the number in front of the x, to all your brackets that you've prepared in step number 3. And then step number 5 is just solve it. Square root both sides and take any numbers to the other side. Good luck with all of that. I hope you understand and I hope I've helped you. Don't forget to like and subscribe, and see you next time. Good luck. Bye.